All right, fun.
So we are up to lesson 4. You can open up your book to page 100. Um, and today we're going to be talking about the Kabbalah of time. Let me just pull up the slide
Hi.
that we have here. Hello, Gary. Just getting started. So you're all right. Let's get this going. Okay. Fantastic. All right. So today's lesson is the Kabbalah of meaning. Lesson 4, meanings in the rhythm of time, aka the Kabbalah of time. So a man sees his old friend in Brighton Beach and he invites him to schmooze with him. He says, why don't you come into my apartment and we'll have a nice little schmooze? Anyways, the hour is late. It's late in the evening and they're sitting there schmoozing, enjoying memories from way back in the good old days when they went to Cheder together. And the guest turns to the host and says, I noticed you don't have any clocks in here. How do you tell time? I don't even know what time it is. So the host says, don't worry. Who needs a watch to tell time? Here, I have a shofar. Says a shofar? It's like, yeah, you don't tell time with a shofar. It's like, how do you tell time with a shofar? Says, just watch me. And he goes, doo-doo! And suddenly he hears his neighbor scream from down the hall. What are you, crazy? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Why are you blowing the shofar? He's like, you see, that's how you tell time with the shofar. So today we're going to be discussing the rhythms of time. But first, we got to do a recap of. Sorry, I turned on the game. Um, listen, now you know what I'm doing in my spare time. But
hmm
then the last few weeks we were discussing the how we can align our purpose and our values with the values that the Torah has given us. That purpose comes from outside the system, right? Because God created the system. God is the creator of everything that we have, and so our purpose comes from God. And that means that while we may ascribe and assign meaning to certain things, ultimately, the ultimate purpose of why we're here, speak to the manufacturer, speak to the boss, speak to God who made us. He'll tell you why you're here. Right now, some of us are fortunate enough to have clearer clues than others, and this whole course is kind of a little bit of the game of Clue. You ever played the card game Clue? You have to find this thing and that thing until you find who the person is, right? So so that's what we're trying to do over here. And today we're going to discuss how to keep it fresh. But there's just one point that we mentioned last week, which is, I think, very, very important and very crucial to understand the Kabbalah of meaning. And that is, God had a taiva. A taiva in Yiddish basically means a desire, just a lust and a yearning to just enjoy something. What was God's taiva? His taiva was to score goals, but not to score goals on an empty net. There's no kunst. There's no fun in scoring goals on an empty net. The idea is to score goals when there's a big goalie and a small net, and to somehow squeeze that puck into the net. So for that, let me illustrate the following.
Only a Canadian would know what you're saying. Only a Canadian.
Okay, so that was the first frame. Now look at the right.
One's with a team and one's alone?
Okay, so what's the key difference? So you're saying one's with a team and one's alone. That
Yes.
that's one way of looking at it. But why is the one on the left so exciting and the one on the right not exciting?
Because there's no interaction with other people.
There's no interaction. Okay, that's one element.
Oh, there's no audience in the second one, or there's very little audience.
There's
No
very
one's
little
watching?
audience. But why is there very little audience? You'd think that everybody should come and watch the guy gets scoring 15 goals in 5 seconds.
Because a one-man hockey team is not as interesting as a multi-person hockey team.
We're getting there. The point is the guy on the left scored a goal in a tight spot in a very difficult angle. But the guy on the left, on the right, is scoring goals in an open net. I could do that. My 2-year-old could do that,
Oh, I see. You're right.
right?
I see it. I see it now.
So God doesn't get so excited. He doesn't have a taiva to spread godliness amongst the angels. Because the angels are an open net. They're like, sure, God, come, welcome home. We want more of you, as much as we can get. But it's specifically in this world where everything present in this world screams, I am me. I exist. God? What God? Who God? In fact, it says that the Medrash tells us King Pharaoh from Egypt used to say, the river is mine and I made it. You know, first of all, who are you? Second of all, who says the river is yours? And then even more than that, you're going to say that you made the river? How preposterous is that? But that's the world we live in. We live in a world that's opposing godliness. It's like the opposing team saying, no, you can't score against me. And that's where the thrill is. That's where God wants to have the taiva. That's where he wants to have the dwelling place, specifically in a world that isn't naturally holy, that isn't naturally godly. That's where he wants to have that dwelling place. So, with that in mind, we're gonna talk about the Jewish calendar. So we're going from hockey to calendars. So in 1994, in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, there was a particular frustrating episode in the Jewish community. Now, granted, this was a couple of years after the Crown Heights riots. There was a lot of tension between the Jewish community and the black community in Crown Heights. And there's every year on Labor Day, there's the West Indian Day Parade in Crown Heights, and it literally goes down Eastern Parkway right across 770, blocking off the main thoroughfare in Crown Heights. It just so happened to be that in 1994, Labor Day was on Erev Rosh Hashanah. So Labor Day was Monday, Rosh Hashanah was Monday night. Okay? So a couple of members of the Crown Heights Community Council approached the organizers of the West Indian Day Parade and said, look, we have Rosh Hashanah. It's a very important holiday. I understand you do your parade every year, but would you consider moving your parade either to Sunday or a different Monday or something, some other time, so that it doesn't interfere with our high holiday preparations? People need to do last minute errands are going up and down the street. It's, here they have to cross through, and especially given the timing, it was a couple of years after some real contentious times with the Crown Heights riots between the two communities. Even just passing through a parade of the other community, let's keep this PC. It's just all around a big mess. And would it be possible to move the parade to a different day? So the organizer said, I understand there's a conflict, but we can't move the parade. But how about you just move Rosh Hashanah to a different day? So they made it work. Rosh Hashanah happened. The parade was not moved, but Rosh Hashanah still happened. And no, they didn't move Rosh Hashanah, obviously. Which begs the question, why not? And, to emphasize this point, I was talking to somebody a few years ago. Someone, let's just say in Southern California, who I was inviting to the Pesach Seder. I said, would you like to join us for the Pesach Seder? And he said, it was a Wednesday night, I believe, that year. And he says, look, I'm a little busy. I'm traveling, this, that. I said, is your family doing a Seder? He's like, oh, yeah, we're going to get together on Saturday night. That's when it works for the whole family. We're gonna do the Seder on Saturday night. So I said, listen, take some matzah and just eat it on Wednesday nights. Even if you're not having a Seder, eat the matzah on Wednesday night at the very least. Why? Because the times on our calendar are very, very important, and we're going to talk about that. Well, here, the Jewish calendar attunes us to the spiritual pulse of time. You see, time has a special significance in our lives, in spirituality. Time has a soul. Time has an energy. In fact, there's a well-known Jewish law that if somebody experiences a miracle in their life, they ought to thank God for the miracle, not just only when they recover or when they get out of the point of danger, but every year. Every time they pass that place. So, for instance, somebody was involved in a car accident where it could have been fatal, God forbid, and yet they survived. And they thank God for that survival. If they are ever to pass that same road ever again, if they can get over the trauma, and they can drive by that same road, they should say the following blessing: Baruch sha'asa lines b'makom hazeh. Blessed is he who performed miracles for me in this place. Why? Because place matters, and if God showed you His beneficence and shined His blessing and His holiness upon you in that place, it's a holy place, at least in regards to you, and you should thank God for that any time you pass that space. And Judaism teaches us, especially with the lens of Kabbalah, that time is the same way. Time is holy. It's sacred. And when you experience something at a certain time, it doesn't just pass and we forget about it, but every time that event occurs, the same level of holiness, the same blessings, the same fortitude that was back then repeats itself. So this is what we call the space and time dynamic energy. In Jewish law, someone who experiences a miracle at a specific location has an obligation to thank Hashem when he encounters that space again. One recites a special blessing: blessed is he who performed the miracle for me at this place. Says the Rebbe, the same can be said of time. Why is that? That brings me to the next slide, because time is like a spiral staircase. If you don't know what a spiral staircase is, this is what it looks like. So what that means is that, and I'll read from the Tanya over here, which is on the screen, the author of Chabad Hasidism, a preeminent scholar and author on Jewish mysticism. He writes as follows: every year on Rosh Hashanah, a greater divine light, one that has never shone before, is invested into our world. To some degree, this process takes place every day. That means a new light, a new energy is invested into our world. Every day, God says, should I do this all over again? Should I not? Fine, I'll do it. And he says yes. He presses the go button every single day. In fact, every moment, every instant, God says it, but I don't want to get too carried away. And the Alter Rebbe continues here in the second paragraph: this new energy can remain hidden. The revelation of this light, activating it in a manner that is felt by creation, depends upon the kindness and actions of those below. In other words, the ability to tap into this special moment is present, but it's up to us to tap into that energy. So, in other words, the landing on the staircase on every floor is, in terms of longitude and latitude, it's in the same spot, right? However, it's just higher up in elevation, right? So what that means is every year there's a cycle of time that comes around and repeats itself, but it's not a stale repetition. It doesn't get old. We're not just going back to the same time. We're elevating. We're going higher and higher on that spiral staircase, but repeating the same type of cycles. And that means there's a new energy and a higher energy every year on Rosh Hashanah. And every year on tonight, which is Vav Kislev, on the 6th day of Kislev, last year had a certain energy, and this year has the same Vav Kislev energy, but it's just on a higher level. And that's because time is a living, breathing force. It's a powerful force, and it has a lot of meaning, as we'll see. So now this is true, and now the example given here is in regards to Rosh Hashanah, but the same can be said of any cycle in our lives. Every day is a cycle of time. Also, every day there's the same pattern, the same cycle, but we're always going higher and higher. So let's go to page 100. We have a little exercise for y'all. And I want you to imagine you're walking with a child in Massachusetts, and you come across a sign that reads, Plymouth Rock, landing place of the Pilgrims, 1620. By the way, Gary, if you want to unmute yourself for this little part of the discussion. The child turns to you and asks, why did the Mayflower land here of all places? What would you
Yes.
say?
I see it. Let's see. Plymouth Rock, landing place of the Pilgrims, 1620, Commonwealth, Massachusetts. That's what you just read.
Right. So
So
if you saw this and a child asks you, why did the Mayflower land here of all places? What would be the answer?
this
The
is where God
GPS.
directed them?
This is where God directed them. Okay, that's a very enlightened answer. But Mike, what would you say?
A GPS.
A
They had a
GPS?
GPS that took them there. Am I correct or no?
Okay. But why Plymouth Rock?
They had to have it had to have been divinely inspired because they were escaping persecution. Everyone on the Mayflower were, how do you put it? If you're running from the term that you would use to describe an individual that's running from persecution.
A
Is there a name that
refugee? A
popped up?
fugitive?
Well, that's escaping justice, but
A
not
refugee?
persecution. Huh?
Yes, I understand your point, but hear my question. The question is why over here of all places? So you're telling me that God knows why they landed there. I'm very proud of God for knowing why they landed there. The question is for us humans. Why did
Is there something in
why
the
did they land
Torah?
there?
Is there
The
something in the
season?
Torah?
The season?
Well, they can't, they were coming from, okay, let's say they were coming from Britain. So then they sailed obviously across the Atlantic and they land on the East Coast. Obviously, um, with the season of time, God
Okay.
knew
You
that.
know you're reminding me of. I spent the summer in France when I was 16, and this is not very flattering, but I went to yeshiva on trial. At the end of the summer, they said, this is not the right yeshiva for you, but we have a recommendation. And the guy was Israeli. The teacher was telling me this. He's like, there's a new yeshiva, Ergetz, in America. There's somewhere in America, there's a new yeshiva. I think that's a good place. I was like, do you happen to be talking about Baltimore? Because I had known that there was a new yeshiva there at the time. He's like, I don't know. I don't remember the name of the place, but it's somewhere in America. I was like, thank you very much.
Well, aren't how many yeshivas are in the United States?
There's
That
dozens, if not
that's
hundreds. But but it was just a little ironic that's the way he worded it. But the idea is it sounds so ignorant to say somewhere in America. So why did they land at Plymouth Rock? Because they were trying to get across the Atlantic Ocean. Shkoyach, thank you very much. That doesn't tell me why they landed there. So let me ask you a
Well,
different question to bring this a little closer to home. Now imagine you're walking with the same child right here in Pasadena, California, and you come upon a sign that says, Welcome to Historic Mount Wilson Observatory. Now, this time the child asks, why did they build the observatory here? What would you answer to that?
well,
it
because it's
was
the best place to see. It's the best place to see what they need to see, planetary or the stars. That is the
Explain.
right
You're
point.
saying because it's somewhere in America?
No, because it's the best place to, it's the highest point. It's the best place to see the vision, to see what they want it, to see what they want to observe.
Right.
It's the highest point
I
in
Let's
agree
that
with
see.
you.
area.
And just for illustrative purposes, today I took this picture as I was
Mm-hmm.
driving up Baldwin Avenue, and right there is Mount Wilson. And just to show you, you have some beautiful clear blue skies on a nice November morning, which is to say that Southern California is blessed to have many days of sunshine or at night moonshine and clear skies, right? So you're right.
Yes.
Southern California is primed for this type of research. And being high up, 5,710 feet above ground, is, or I should say above sea level, they were on the ground, is a perfect opportunity to be able to get a better view of the galaxies, right?
Rabbi, you might say it's astronomically strategic.
Astronomical and strategical. Yes.
Astronomically strategic.
Yes, correct. Or the way I'm going to put it, and by the way, just fun fact, the Mayflower was at you mentioned about the GPS. The Mayflower was actually supposed to go for Virginia, but they had a mess up with their GPS. Listen, in 1620, they probably forgot to recharge their Apple Watch. That's probably what happened. And they ended up in Massachusetts.
By
But
the way, there were Jews on the Mayflower, weren't they?
I'm sure
Weren't
there
there?
were.
Yeah, because I even know before that,
Yeah.
before that, there were Jews that were coming to America to escape persecution,
Hmm.
as the others were,
Yes,
that were
story of our
not Jews.
lives. But here's the way to frame this. Plymouth Rock is something that was assigned value after the fact. Because the Mayflower landed there, we've assigned value to Plymouth Rock. Whereas when we're talking about Mount Wilson Observatory, that's something that has intrinsic value. So again, it's important to keep in mind these two words: assigned value versus intrinsic value. And that's why Edwin Hubble built the world's largest telescope at the top of Mount Wilson, because that was a place that was scientifically and astronomically, strategically appropriate for this type of research. So it wasn't just by chance. They're like, oh well, let's look for a patch of grass and buy a cheap piece of land, and we'll put down our telescope. No, this was very strategic because this place has intrinsic value for this type of thing. So places could have meaning um, just because we assign meaning to them, or they could have meaning, they could have value because of something intrinsic to them. How much maple syrup is made in California? Not a whole lot. But in Quebec, where I come from, there's quite a lot of maple syrup. Why? Because intrinsically, the weather and the climate in Quebec, with all the cold and the way the tree sap is released from the maple trees, it helps produce good quality maple syrup, right? But at the same time, there's not a whole lot of wineries in Quebec. Where are the wineries? Here in Napa Valley. Because the way the hills are and the way the wind, um, brushes up against the hills and creates the cooling effect and the right temperatures and this and that. I don't understand all of these things fully, but the idea is that it's primed intrinsically for winemaking, right? So these are not random things. We didn't just decide to plant vineyards in the Napa Valley, but it was discovered as something that has intrinsic value for this purpose. Now there are other things. Why is the BP gas station at one corner and the Mobil gas station at the other corner? I don't know. Just because Chaim Yankel bought BP and Todris bought Mobil, right? It doesn't really matter because that's where they chose to set it up. So
Well,
Yeah.
Chaim Yankel is a very good real estate agent.
All right.
Did you know that?
I'm sure he is, but let's stay on topic. So on page 102, just to further hammer home this point, imagine you read in the newspaper that Dr. David Baker, this is a true story actually, has been awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, or one of the Nobel Prizes in chemistry, and then two other people shared the co-prize, whatever. Um, and then you also read that Ivy, who's a Washington, D.C. resident, received a free Metro Rail card and a $500 gift card for being the 1 millionth passenger to ride the Metro Rail at Dulles Airport. It says the millionth passenger at the airport, but I think the idea was the 1 millionth passenger to ride the Metro Rail at Dulles Airport. So if a child asks you, why did Dr. Baker get the Nobel Prize? What would you tell him? And if the same child asked you, why did Ivy receive the prize at the airport? What would be the answer to that? Right? So
Oh,
again,
oh,
yeah.
you mean assigned value versus intrinsic
Oh,
value?
there you go. So,
Okay.
so Dr. David Baker won the Nobel Prize because he had intrinsic value. He's a brilliant guy. He was gifted with perhaps good genes and a strong education and a healthy work ethic and a determination to discover certain things in chemistry. Hence, he won the Nobel Prize. Why did Ivy get the ticket at Dulles Airport? Because she was the 1 millionth ticket. She was lucky, right? She was they assigned value to the 1 millionth passenger, and it happened to be her. So now let's do a little pop quiz. And again, if you want to unmute yourself for this one, because I want to see how well you know the secular calendar. So Gary, when is Mother's Day?
May 10th,
Nope,
Mother's Day. May
close.
it's
I'm saying annually.
the first Sunday in May, or the
The second
second
Sunday
Sunday
in May.
second Sunday in May. Okay.
When is Memorial Day?
May,
No,
sometime in May,
May 30th,
The last Monday in
last
May.
Monday in May.
When
Okay.
when's Labor Day?
That's
September.
the first Monday in September.
First Monday in September, except September 1st. When's Veterans Day?
The second Tuesday in November.
No, actually it was that, but then it got switched back to November 11th, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, November 11th.
Anyways,
Yes.
okay. So let me ask you, why is Mother's Day the second Sunday in May?
I don't know.
Okay, you got to ask
That's when all
Hallmark.
mothers have their children on the second Monday. Is that
Actually,
correct?
actually, no. It's the second Sunday. Second Sunday.
Second
We
Sunday,
we we, ha
excuse
we
me.
try to have all our kids on Monday. That's been our pattern. Um, why is Memorial Day on the last Sunday, the last Monday in May?
Something to do with World War II?
Something to
End
do with
of,
May Day, right?
yeah,
Well,
yes, I think
the day
so.
that
But May
it's
Day's on the
around
first
the
of
time
May,
World War II ended,
right?
correct?
Not
Perhaps.
sure.
But
1945.
really, it's just to commemorate the end of World War II. And the same is with Labor
Okay.
Day or Veterans Day. Why did the World War One end on November 11th? Because that's when they signed the agreement, and that was that. But there's nothing inherent to that day that made it happen.
Okay.
There's no essential connection between those days and the commemorations that happen on those days. Certainly not Mother's Day, which is a social construct sponsored by Hallmark, right? So reminds
Why
me of
is
the
why is
that
go on.
reminds me of the story that a couple of boys decided one Mother's Day they knock on their mother's door and they say, "Mom, you don't need to get out of bed today. It's Mother's Day. We're gonna go make breakfast." And so the mother's thinking like, "Wow, look at these mention I've raised. They're finally showing me a little respect. Ah, I get to sleep in a little and have breakfast in bed. Can life get any better?" Anyways, she hears the pots and the pans, the eggs are cracking, hash browns filling the air. Chaya, she can't wait. Anyways, time is passing, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's getting a little quieter in the kitchen. And 25 minutes, half an hour garnished. Nobody's coming. So she decides to go check it out. What's going on? She walks into the kitchen and she sees her kids are sitting there enjoying a lavish breakfast on their own. She says, "Hello, what happened?" They said, "Well, Mom, in honor of Mother's Day, we decided we're gonna give you the day off, and we made our own breakfast."
Now I'm wondering, Rabbi, why Halloween
Very
is on.
funny.
I'm wondering why Halloween would be on October the 31st.
I don't know. We're not getting too deep down that rabbit hole. The point is like this: Jewish holidays don't work that way. In Judaism, in Kabbalah, time is held reverentially. Time isn't just a simple calendar box that's empty and we have to fill it up with something, but every day, every moment has a distinctive, unique quality, and that means it has a particular spiritual, divine energy imbued into that day uniquely and not given to any other day. And so every single day really, really matters. So if I had to ask you, are secular holidays more like Plymouth Rock or more like Mount Wilson in their significance, in their value?
More like Plymouth Rock.
More like Plymouth Rock. We landed at a place, we all agreed, we're going to put a plaque up, and now we have a nice tourist attraction in Massachusetts, right?
That's a sign value.
Exactly. But Jewish holidays have intrinsic value, meaning every day has intrinsic value to it. It has a soul, it has spiritual energy inside it, which is what makes it the day that it is.
Is that because God tells them specifically in the Torah, he says, in this month, on this day, you will celebrate your feast of,
Correct.
the
Correct. But
different
we're gonna
feasts.
actually see how that is kind of there's a layer deeper than that, and that's where we're going over here. So
Okay.
on the one hand, secular holidays can be very meaningful. You can honor your veterans on November 11th. You can remember those who have given their lives for our country on the last Monday of May, and that's certainly very meaningful. But that's meaningful. Remember, that's level one. That's level one of the Kabbalah of meaning. That's lesson one of this course, which is great. Nothing against that. In fact, I spent an hour and a half talking about the value of that. That's great. But today we're on level 4. We're learning lesson 4 of the Kabbalah meaning. And we're taking things to a whole nother level. And that's because when you're eating those hot dogs on Memorial Day, you can eat the hot dogs on Mother's Day and they'll taste exactly the same. Right? It doesn't taste any different on May 31st or June 1st. But when it comes to Jewish holidays, there's a very big difference. And that's why you see that so many secular holidays are moved to the nearest Monday for convenience, right? Like, I can't do this Veterans Day thing on Tuesday. We're just going to do it on Monday, or we're just going to always do Mother's Day on Sunday, because who's going to honor their mother on a Wednesday when they have to go to work, right? So might as well do it on Sunday, right? So there's nothing intrinsically attached to that day. And even Thanksgiving, right? We're 2 days away from Thanksgiving, which this year happens to be on November 27th. Why? Because Thursday happens to be on November 27th. And somebody somewhere decided that turkeys and Thursdays have to do with thanks. Personally, I find it's a lot easier to get together for a family dinner on a Friday evening, which is what I plan on doing. But the point is that these days are assigned value by society. They're what we call a social construct. They have assigned value to them. But
Well,
something that has
Valentine's Day.
that's already a pagan holiday. We're not even going to go there. But let's put it this way: Edwin Hubble, who built that large telescope at the top of Mount Wilson, couldn't have placed it at the base of the mountain or right here next door to me in Arcadia and had the same success, even though it had lots of the similar climate, but he had to be on that elevation. Why? Because the place actually matters. The rock of Plymouth Rock only matters because we assigned meaning to it, which is obviously in stark contrast um, to our holidays. And the contrast is so stark and so meaningful that it requires a closer look. So let's start on page 103 of the text readings, where we will talk about the Shabbat spice and the Shabbat sky. So, Mike, you want to start us off?
The Roman emperor asked Rabbi how is that pronounced?
Yehoshua ben Hanan.
Yehoshua ben, and the next word would be how do you pronounce
Hananya.
that? Chananya.
Good enough.
Why do the dishes of Shabbat produce such an enticing aroma? Okay, he answered, we have a specific spice, and
Spatial,
it is called
spatial
Shabbat.
spice.
What? What?
It's a special spice.
A special spice, and it is called Shabbat. We place it in the Shabbat dishes, and it gives off a fragrant aroma.
So what's going on over here? Is he pulling his leg? Is he taking the Roman emperor for a ride? What's going on over
Not
here?
a bad idea.
Well,
Not a bad idea.
well, that's not what
Well,
happened.
because God says in many of the sacrifices or in pleasing and coming before in the Torah, it talks about how they would prepare, either they prepared the sacrifice or they prepared a meal blessing or like a grain blessing or something,
Right,
and God smelled the pleasant odor. It says that God
right.
smelled the pleasant odor, and and with Noah, God smelled the pleasant
Vayarach Hashem
odor,
esriach anichach. Yes, God
and then he said to
smelled the pleasant
himself,
fragrance of it.
he said to himself, he will never destroy the earth by that. And after he smelled the pleasant odor,
What
God says to himself or thinks to himself, there's a word for it, that he actually says to himself that
I
he
know
won't
exactly what you're
ever do
talking
that.
about, and that is talking about that when we bring a sacrifice in the holy temple, or metaphorically, it could also apply every time we sacrifice something for God. Um, it brings God pleasure. Absolutely. Over here, we're talking about something else. We're talking about that human beings here eating cholent on Shabbos, eating gefilte fish, have a special spice in the food, and that spice is called Shabbos. What that means is like this: hot dogs on July 3rd taste exactly the same as hot dogs on July 4th. Gefilte fish on Friday does not taste the same as gefilte fish on Friday night. Why? Because there is a Shabbos spice in the dishes. And that means that it actually tastes different on Shabbos. Why? Because there's a certain energy there on Shabbos. And even a Roman emperor, as the story implies, could walk by a Jewish home and smell that there's something different and say, I know that there's something different. I don't know what it is. You probably put some special spice in there. He's like, no, it's the same gefilte fish they eat in Rome, but it has the Shabbos spice. And to
Is the
illustrate this point,
Shabbos
there's another story with Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, who was known as the Holy Ruzhiner or the Heilige Ruzhiner in Yiddish. The Holy Ruzhiner was 7 years old approximately. He was a young boy in Cheder. He was learning from his Malamed, from his teacher, about the laws of Shabbos. He was learning a Mishnah which discusses what does somebody do if he finds himself in a place and a time where he doesn't know what day of the week it is. When does such a person observe Shabbos? Do they ignore it? Do they keep Shabbos forever until they meet civilization? Or do they just make it up? What do they do? And it's a whole discussion. Some opinions say that you just count the day you landed there a Sunday, and when you reach 7 days, that's your Shabbos until further notice. And there's different opinions, and this little Yisraelikal was learning these laws with his teacher. And he raises his hand politely and he says, Rebbe, I don't understand. How could someone not know that it's Shabbos? The teacher says, well, let me reiterate. He happens to be in a desert. He could have been blindfolded. He could have been in a coma, whatever. He says, again, I don't understand. How is it possible that somebody doesn't realize it's Shabbos? Forget the past. In the moment, how do you not realize it's Shabbos? So being a good teacher, he realized there was something deeper bothering the child. And he said, why do you think it's impossible for a person to lose track of Shabbos? So the child, being already spiritually attuned, more spiritually attuned than you and I, certainly even as developed adults, he turns to the teacher and he says, it's very simple, because on Shabbos, the sky looks different. You can look up and just see that it's Shabbos. Now, most of us are not privileged to be in this kind of spiritual status where we're so attuned to what's going on in the atmosphere around us to realize the spiritual energy that's present. But people who have that level of heightened sensitivity are able to perceive the holiness of the day. So this is what we're talking about: the Shabbos spice in the food, and the Shabbos sky. It's because the Shabbos of the holiness of Shabbos is not something that we create, but it's something that's intrinsically there before us, and we enter that frame in time. We enter that, I would say, space, but it's really a frame of time of Shabbos when we come there, because holy moments are intrinsically holy. The fact that we do certain rituals on those days is because it's intrinsically primed for that. Mount Wilson is intrinsically primed for telescopes. Shabbos is intrinsically primed for Kiddush and Challah and Cholent and prayer and turning off our phones and all the wonderful things. Because the sky is different. The taste of the same food is different because it is intrinsically a special day. Now, the same could be said, of course, for something like Yom Kippur. That Yom Kippur is intrinsically holy, and some of us are more spiritually attuned to it, some of us less than others. But the truth of the matter is that every Jew is able to tap into the spirituality and the energy and the soul of the time of Yom Kippur. And the more we attune ourselves to it, the more we'll be able to experience it in a deeper way. But it's there, it's available for the taking, and by the way, we will feel it even if we're not trying to feel it. And that's why there's so many stories of people who somehow on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, they suddenly walked into the synagogue and they felt something that they've never felt before. Just this week, I heard a story, verified true story, from Rabbi Paltiel in Long Island, New York. He's a rabbi with at least double the experience that I have. And about a decade and a half ago, he encountered this Holocaust survivor, an Alta Yid, an old Jew who was very bitter and cynical. He claimed he didn't believe in God, and he would always he didn't come to synagogue, but he somehow bumped into Rabbi Paltiel in a parking lot to somewhere, maybe in a Trader Joe's, maybe in Chase Bank, who knows? And every time he'd bump into the rabbi, he would harass him. And he'd tell him, why do you still believe in God? Why do you still do all these things? If you would have seen the smoke coming out of the ovens that I saw, you wouldn't believe in God. You wouldn't be wearing that yarmulke. And every time he saw the rabbi, he would harass him and annoy him. And being a wise man, Rabbi Paltiel kept his mouth shut. He took it in. He understood. This is a person who went through a hard time. I'm not judging him. Let it be. So this guy, his name is Jack, would constantly give his feedback, let's just say, to Rabbi Paltiel, and Rabbi Paltiel was very polite to Jack. And this relationship went on every so often they'd bump into each other. It happened to be one Yom Kippur during Kol Nidre. Rabbi Paltiel looks at the crowded room and he noticed that Jack is somewhere in the back of the room and he's kind of trying to hide amongst the people so he shouldn't be noticed. But to his misfortune, Rabbi Paltiel did notice Jack. And he made a mental note that when he has a free moment, if there's a window in the prayers where he's able to get away from the podium, he's going to approach him. And he notices right after Kol Nidre, Jack is heading out the door. So he makes a beeline right to the back of the room. He says, Jack, thank you for coming, but what are you doing here? I thought you don't believe in God. He says, Rabbi, what do you mean? He says, Rabbi, heint bin ich nicht Jack. Heint bin ich Yankele. Today I'm not Jack. Today I'm Yankele.
He's assuming a new identity.
He didn't assume
He's
a new
assuming
identity.
a new identity.
Listen. He said, heint bin ich nicht Jack. Heint bin ich Yankel.
Why would he say that?
What he's saying is that today's Yom Kippur, and I know today is Yom Kippur, and I could have all the complaints in the world and all the difficulties and challenges and cognitive dissonance, but Yom Kippur is Yom Kippur, and this is where I belong, and I know that, and my assimilated identity of Jack, who you met at the bank and at the shopping center, that's not who I am today. Today I'm Yankel. Today I'm in touch with my Jewish soul. Today I recognize that there's something in the air. There's Yom Kippur in the air. Because there's something about Yom Kippur that stirs the soul. And even someone who has long forgotten what day it is able to feel that there's something that happens on Yom Kippur. Now, tell me how many stories you've heard of this, that somebody showed up at a 4th of July fireworks show saying, I forgot that I was American and I rediscovered my American identity and I just felt that it was 4th of July today and I decided to show up for it's ridiculous. You never hear a story. They don't say these kind of stories about 4th of July or Martin Luther King Day. These stories are told about Yom Kippur. These stories are told about Chanukah. These stories are told about Pesach. Why? Because there's something in the air that's palpable. Now, to some people, like the Ruzhiner, they see it in the sky. To some people, even the Roman emperor was able to smell that there was a different spice in the food. And the truth is, every one of us is able to tap into that energy. Because these are days that are meaningful, not just because we celebrate them. In fact, we celebrate these days because they are meaningful. Now, another more contemporary story, taking this now to the West Coast, is a memoir written by Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz. He was better known as Schwartzy. He was a Chabad rabbi at UCLA, and he was a very hippie kind of rabbi. He wore a nice tie-dyed colored shirt. But he recounts a striking conversation that he had with a staff member at UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute, which in short is NPI. And this staff member had tracked a certain pattern over the years at UCLA NPI. Gary, you want to read text 3? I know we skipped text 2, but we'll read it later.
Yes, let's see here.
Page 105.
Yom Kippur. Let's see. Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz and Rabbi Mendel Schwartz. The doctor told me, this is page 105, the doctor told me that an average of 5 people per day experience breakdowns and are brought to MPI. Few of them are Jewish, but he said, I have noticed that every single year around the Jewish holidays, the Jewish admittance goes up dramatically. And on one day each year, admittance spikes closer to 20 people, with 15 of them Jewish. Which day is that? I asked. The doctor said Yom Kippur. And here is the punchline. Each year, when admittance
So
to
let
NPI
me
went,
just, if I could just interrupt you, just
go
to
ahead.
clarify those statistics. On an average day, they had 5 people. On Yom Kippur,
Mhm.
they had 400% of that patient count, all 300 of which were Jewish patients.
Aha.
Yeah, keep going. And here's the punchline.
Okay. And here is the punchline. Each year, when admittance to NPI went up on Yom Kippur, it was on the Hebrew calendar date, the 10th day of Tishrei, not a consistent date on the secular calendar. The Jews who were brought in on Yom Kippur didn't even know it was Yom Kippur.
So, in other words, they weren't consciously observing the holiday. And many were probably not thinking about Judaism at all, but somehow their inner world responded on that day. Something stirred inside them, something cracked, and caused them to end up where they ended up. Because there was
What
something that was awakened in their heart because of that spiritual energy of Yom Kippur that was there in the air. And that caused them a soul level pull towards teshuvah, because the whole theme of Yom Kippur is returning to God. It's repentance. It's cleansing ourselves of all our mishigas, of all our troubles, of all our sins. That's why we wear white on Yom Kippur, because there's a certain energy on Yom Kippur for that thing. So for some people, it means they sit down with a prayer book and they cry over a prayer book. For some people, it means that they show up to shul for one time a year. For some people, it means that there's something really deep inside of them that just causes some level of psychosis, because they're just feeling the energy of Yom Kippur and telling them, you got to do something. You have to change your life. Something needs to happen. Something needs to change. So if we're completely spiritually attuned, like the Ruzhiner, we could just look up in the sky and we know exactly what to do. But for some of us, it may not be in that way, but for every one of us, it's present and we feel it sometimes more consciously, sometimes subconsciously, but it affects us because it's there. So now, this idea of a holiday's spiritual energy being embedded into the fabric of time leads us to an even deeper and more surprising insight. And this is the idea of chutes and ladders. You ever played the game Chutes and Ladders?
By Parker Brothers.
I don't know who made it. The game Chutes and Ladders. It's a board game.
Yes, when I was a child, younger.
Okay. Okay, that's all you need to know. So how does Chutes and Ladders work? You hop around the board and you roll the dice. You go 2 spots, 3 spots, that, and then you land on 18 and you go whoop, right back to 4, right? And then you keep going. You get a 2. You land on 6, and suddenly you climb a ladder up to 82, and and that's how it goes, because there's certain spots you land there. It just takes you on a trip somewhere else. What am I using this as an analogy for? There's a concept in Judaism, in Kabbalah, megalgalin zechut liyom zakai. We roll a merit onto a meritorious day. So if a merit is supposed to happen over here, we say, wait a second, there's a good day right here. Let's just push you over there. Kind of like chutes and ladders. Whoop! We'll just move you to that other spot. So what do I mean by that? Um, the well, actually, this Shabbos is the yahrzeit of the Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Chabad. Now, 1 year before that, he was imprisoned for trumped up charges and whatnot, and he was released from prison on that day. Hear this. It sounds perplexing, but I'll explain. The Rebbe explains that the the redemption from his release from prison happened on the day it happened, because his passing was going to occur the following year on that day. So even though the passing happened a year later, the release from prison happened the year prior because of what was going to happen. What's going on over here? What we're saying is that day was already intrinsically a special day. And that's why it's the day of his yahrzeit. That's why it was the day where he was released from prison. Let me give you an example on the flip side to help illustrate this idea. It says that there are 5 tragedies that happened to the Jewish people on the 17th day of Tammuz. Famously, the tablets were shattered. When Moses came down from the mountain, the tablets were shattered on the 17th day of Tammuz. Hold on. During the times of the first and second temple, the walls of Jerusalem were breached also on the day of the 17th of Tammuz. Also, the sacrifices ceased to be brought. The daily sacrifices were ceased to be brought prior to the destruction of the temple on the 17th day of Tammuz. So there were lots of terrible things. There was apostemos, also burnt a Torah scroll on the 17th of Tammuz. What's going on over here? 17th of Tammuz is a sad day. It's intrinsically a sad day. And so these things were kind of chutes and ladders landing on the 17th of Tammuz. So maybe the Romans could have destroyed the walls of Jerusalem on the 15th of Tammuz, but God orchestrated it so that it'll land on the 17th day of Tammuz. Because bad things happen on bad days, and good things happen on good days. And that's why, if you look throughout history, there are a lot of amazing things that happen on Passover, one of which is my brother-in-law Zushi was born on Passover. But speaking of Passover, let me ask you, who was the first person to eat matzah in history? Or when was the first matzah eaten in history?
With the Moses and
Incorrect.
on that night. No? Okay.
That would be
Didn't
the
they
easy
eat?
answer. I'm asking you because it's a difficult answer.
Okay.
It would be the day that we left Egypt, correct?
That's what Gary was saying, but no. So I'll tell you something. First of all, it says that Abraham ate matzah. When Abraham had welcomed the angels, it said he made cakes, and the commentaries tell us what kind of cakes? Flat cakes, matzahs. Even his nephew Lot gave the angels matzahs. Furthermore, one of the key observances on Passover is the offering of the Karban Pesach, the Paschal lamb or goat, whatever, the Paschal offering. And it says that Adam and Eve, when they had 2 boys, Cain and Abel, they told them that we should make offerings to God because this is a special day for the Jewish people, and we should bring offerings. And that's when the whole story with Cain and Abel, with Cain killing Abel happened, because they each brought offerings. Cain brought a lousy offering, and Abel brought a respectable offering. And so God accepted that offering. Isaac, even Yitzchak Avinu, he asked his son Esav to go hunt and bring him some game. And Rivka, his wife, went and told Yaakov, why don't you go sneak in there and bring him 2 goats and deliver that to him? Why 2 goats? Says Rashi, this is actually last week's Torah portion, because 1 goat was for the Karban Pesach, and 1 goat was for Yitzchak to eat. So we see the whole celebration of Pesach happened many, many years prior. Speaking of Pesach, there was a COVID patient who was in isolation, and the doctor prescribed that his diet should include matzah for breakfast, matzah for lunch, matzah for dinner. And the patient says, doctor, why are you assigning matzah? Is that somehow supposed to help? I mean, I could just imagine all the gastrointestinal challenges that'll be caused by having such a diet. And the doctor says, well, I don't I don't know if matzah will help or it won't help, but it's the only food that we can slide underneath the door. So the only the only thing is when all these people were celebrating Passover prior to the Jews leaving Egypt. So just imagine Abraham, he's sitting with his son Yitzchak. It's like, well, we have inside information. Today is Pesach. We have to eat matzah. We have to slaughter a sacrifice, and we're going to do it all. And Yitzchak and his grandchildren and Yaakov and Esav are sitting around the Seder table. And one of them pipes up and says, Grandpa Abe, I got a question. We're here to celebrate the Jews leaving Egypt. Aren't we a little early for this? Right? So it seems a little strange to think about the Torah telling us about these people celebrating Passover before the Exodus happened. How does that make sense? So it's a good question when we're talking about ourselves, who, from our perspective, for us, what is Pesach all about? It's a reminder, it's a commemoration of an event that took place. But Kabbalah teaches us something deeper. We are not celebrating something that happened once upon a time. For that, we have trophies. Okay, celebrate. You accomplished something once upon a time. Here's a trophy and you'll remember it. Judaism, Jewish holidays are here to celebrate the present, what's happening right now. We celebrate Passover because Passover is a holy day, intrinsically. Yes, of course, we commemorate what happened when the Jews left Egypt. But on a deeper level, Kabbalah teaches us something much more insightful. Look in text 4. Abraham wasn't celebrating an event in the future. He was tapping into a spiritual energy of freedom that was and always is present at that time of year. The energy of liberation is encoded into the composition of the annual cycle. So let me explain what's going on over here. This is actually a very profound idea, and this is really the whole point of this lesson, is this one point. We usually think that Passover is celebrated on the 15th day of Nisan because that's when the Exodus occurred. I'm going to tell you something counterintuitive, quite opposite from that. And that is, according to Kabbalah, the 15th day of Nisan was primed from the day one of creation to be a day that is imbued with spiritual energy of freedom. And that's why the Exodus happened on that day. So it's not that we celebrate the day because the Exodus happened. The Exodus happened because it's a celebratory day. So it's not in this way on the left. The Exodus happened, and therefore the 15th of Nisan is holy. But it's just the other way around. The 15th day of Nisan is inherently holy, and that's why the Exodus happened then. And so, yes, that doesn't mean that there's no rituals anymore. Of course we do the rituals. Of course, we eat matzah and we offer the Korban Pesach and we do all those things, not just symbolically, not just to say, hey, that's what they did then. It kind of it brings back good memories. It reminds me of my mother's chicken soup, and therefore I'm going to have chicken soup because it reminds me of my mother or my grandmother. Or I'm going to eat matzah because it reminds us of our ancestors. No. When you're doing symbolic things, yeah, you could end up with a Seder on Saturday night instead of Wednesday night. Because whatever, it's just symbolic. But when you understand, as Kabbalah teaches us, that the 15th of Nisan is inherently holy, that day is holy, and that's why the Exodus happened. That day is holy, like the spiral staircase, every single year. And so we eat matzah, and in temple times we brought the Korban Pesach, and we tell the story of the Exodus, and we designate this day as a holy day. Why? Because today or this year, the 15th day of Nisan is inherently holy with that special energy. So it's no longer only about something that happened long ago in a faraway land, but it's about what's happening right now, right here. As we say in the blessings of every holiday, Bayamim Ahem Bazman Hazeh. It happened then, but it happened at this time. This day is when it happened. Think about the blessings on the Chanukah menorah. We say the second blessing of the menorah is She'asa nisim lavoiseinu bayamim hahem bizman hazeh. What does that mean? Who has made miracles for our forefathers in those days at this time. So was it those days or was it this time? The answer is very simple. It was those days also, but we can't forget that it was this time. It was this specific day on the Jewish calendar, which has this specific energy, which makes this day the day that it is. Now, with that in mind, of course, Shabbos is a very special day, and that could explain why Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, who went out and saw the sky, and he's like, "What do you mean? Just look at the sky. You can see it's a Shabbos sky." He felt that energy on that day. And so what happens? What is the energy on Shabbos? So during the week, the world feels like an independent reality, something created by God. And if you don't think too much about it, it feels like the world exists apart from God. But on Shabbos, that curtain is drawn back. Again, we need to tune into it. We need to make ourselves available to that pulled back curtain. But that true nature of God being behind all of existence becomes more perceptible on Shabbos, especially to people with high sensitivity like the Ruzhiner. And that's why we are meant to enjoy Shabbos by eating good food on Shabbos. Did you know there's a positive commandment to eat good food on Shabbos? It's a question. Did you know that?
Oh,
No, no,
Okay.
it's news to me.
All right.
to eat good food. I knew there to eat on to celebrate Shabbos,
No, but you should eat better food than
but
you eat
not
the rest of the week.
specifically.
In fact, the Talmud tells us,
Uh-huh.
I think it was Shammai or Abaye, I can't remember, one of the sages who would buy a piece of meat on Sunday and then say, "This piece I'm putting aside for Shabbos." He'd go back to the marketplace on Monday and find a better piece of meat and say, "You know what? Forget what I said yesterday. This is a better piece. I'm saving this one for Shabbos." And every day of the week, he'd eat the thing he bought yesterday and save the new one for Shabbos, the better one, the higher quality one for Shabbos. And by the way, you see this in Jewish homes, traditional Jewish homes throughout the world, that even if they can't afford much during the week, maybe they're eating lower quality proteins or whatever it might be, mostly bread and carbs and whatnot. Comes Shabbos, suddenly we eat meat. I don't care if it's 15, 20, $30 a pound. We eat good food on Shabbos. Why? Because there's a mitzvah la'angai to glorify and to enjoy Shabbos. Why is that? Because during the week there's a barrier, there's a blockage between the spiritual energy in the food and us eating the food. And so when we eat the food, we don't feel spiritual. In fact, we feel more animalistic most of the time when we're eating good food during the week. But on Shabbos, that layer is peeled away. And the food radiates godliness. Everything radiates godliness. And so we're no longer eating food on Shabbos just to enjoy it animalistically, but we're enjoying the godliness in the food. And so that's why in Kabbalah the term is iskafia or ishapcha. Iskafia means you might want to write down these words, or I'll just put it in the chat for simplicity. Iskafia, ishapcha. So I should break it up. Iskafia. Yeah, and ischapcha. So iskafia means that I am bending myself, I'm subduing myself, I'm preventing myself from engaging in too much materialism, lest I become more animalistic and pursuing um, um, worldly pleasures. But ishapcha is an opportunity where we transform those worldly pleasures into holiness. Why is that? Because the holiness embedded in everything physical is now much more apparent. So let me put this in this slide over here. During the week, we must elevate the mundane. On Shabbos, the world is imbued with godly presence. And therefore, everything that we eat is already filled with godliness. And so when you take a bite of your roast on Friday night, you're having a bite of godliness. You're having a bite of Shabbos, which, as Rabbi Yeshua told the emperor, has a special spice called Shabbos. So this helps us understand why we take Shabbos so seriously. It's not just some mental social construct that we created, but the holiness of Shabbos is woven into the fabric of that day, of that time. And that's why the Tanya teaches us that even somebody who's not attuned to what's going on Shabbos is touched by the holiness of Shabbos. And and our souls, which dwells inside of us, is yearning to be in touch with and to appreciate that experience of Shabbos. And if we're going to deprive our souls of that ability, we're causing our soul to miss out on this tremendous opportunity of connectivity, of feeling godliness, of the special spiritual sensitivity and energy that exists on that day. In fact, it says that that God created the world in 6 days with his power of speech. He spoke and the world came to be. Speech is something that you have to utilize when communicating with somebody else. But it says that Shabbos God created with his mind, meaning with his power of thought. So Shabbos is where we enter not just God's communication and outward expression of himself, but on Shabbos we're connecting to God's deepest, innermost thoughts. We're kind of getting inside God's head. And that's something very special. Look at text 5. The Alter Rebbe writes, "For even a complete ignoramus or peasant is suffused with the light of the holiness of Shabbos and holidays. Any violation blemishes the holiness that suffuses their soul, just as it would the holiness of the soul of a tzaddik." So in other words, some of us may say, well, if I'm being honest, I don't always feel the holiness of Shabbos, and therefore maybe I don't observe Shabbos the way it's meant to be observed. And the response to that is that your soul is waiting for that opportunity to connect with the energy of Shabbos. There are certain acts, certain forms of work that blockade and get in the way of that energy reaching your soul. And so if we refrain from those acts of work, it allows the energy to flow right into our soul. If we engage in that kind of work, it's not about, fire and brimstone, what the punishment is going to be afterwards or whatnot. It's about that moment you're missing out on that energy that doesn't get to reach the full flow and the full you don't get the full recharging of the battery, so to speak, for your soul that happens on Shabbos. So, we're looking at this from a Kabbalistic lens and not getting into the technicalities of what you can and cannot do on Shabbos. But really, all of that does matter very much. Why? Because in Jewish literature, there's largely two categories, two genres. There's the category of nigla, the revealed parts of Torah, which is the technical stuff. Do this, do that. Abraham saw the angels and he had a son Yitzchak, and what does that mean? What does this mean? Translate this verse, explain this location of his travels through the desert, this, that. That's all nigla, revealed parts of Torah. It's very technical. It's written like a story. It's a set of laws. It's very straightforward. But then there is Pnimius HaTorah, the inner dimension of the Torah. In other words, the Kabbalistic spiritual dimension explaining the energy spiritually that's going on behind all this. And those two worlds really are connected and interdependent on one another, which is to say that when a Jew goes to his rabbi and says, am I allowed to set a timer for my lights or my crock pot before Shabbos if I'm not actually touching it on Shabbos? Does that violate Shabbos or does it not violate Shabbos? Now, without getting into the answer right now, because that's not the point, why is somebody motivated by such a question? Or let's make it a little more fun. If somebody is orbiting the Earth and has sunrise and sunset, I think every 90 minutes, does that mean that he observes Shabbos every 10 hours? It's a good question. How does it work? Now, why should somebody care about that? Who's going to know which of the other astronauts will actually know or care that he's keeping Shabbos? That's not the point. The point is there is a certain energy in that time that is present, and a Jew wants to be in tune with that. A Jew wants to attach their neshama to that access point, to that spiritual well that's available for them to drink from. Which brings me to the next parable. The story is told of a king who is walking with his son in the desert. And the prince is very thirsty and he wants water. Reminds me, I need a drink. So instead of simply offering his son a drink of water, the king marked locations, put like mile markers along the desert where you can find geology, right? That's like studying what's going on in the earth, correct?
Yeah.
Help me with my English over here. Okay, so
Yes.
geographically, the king put markers where there are wells underneath the ground, and he tells his son, this way, when you are traveling through the desert and I'm not here, you'll be able to find water even without me. Or even if you don't see me, you can always find water on your own. Here you have it. What are those wells? Those wells are all the holidays. And each event reveals a spiritual wellspring, a source of energy that we can access again and again. So my name is not Abraham, your name's not Isaac, and your name's not Rebecca. Although, Mike, you have a son, Rivka, a daughter, Rivka.
Rivka.
But we don't have that ability to just know, oh yeah, today's Pesach, let me serve the angels some matzah, right? We don't have that ability. We don't know where those wells are. But God gifted us with those signposts and says, you should observe Pesach on the 15th day of Nisan. You should observe Rosh Hashanah on the 1st day of Tishrei, Yom Kippur on the 10th day of Tishrei. These are the signposts. Those calendar markers are these mile markers telling us there's a spiritual wellspring. There's a source of energy that we can access. And this happens year after year, again and again and again. Every time we encounter that space, that time, we're able to access that spiritual energy that's there. And it's true again for Shabbos as well. God tells us the seventh day is holy. Why? Because when you pause, you stop working on Shabbos, and you eat cholent, and you eat gefilte fish, and all the other food that has the delicacies, and the eggplant. What else do you like? And the mashed potatoes, and coleslaw, and challah, and Cabernet Sauvignon. All of those
And
things.
schnapps.
What's that?
Schnapps.
A bissel schnapps. Yes, very important. What happens is God's telling you stop and do that and leave go of everything else, because this is where you'll get the wellspring of energy for the rest of the week. Let's read text 6 Gary, you want to read this one? Wells in Time?
Yes, let's see. Wells in Time on, let's see, page 111? No, wait,
108.
maybe I too far ahead. 108. Wells in Time. Each festival marks a point in our journey through time at which our Heavenly Father supplied us with the resources that nurture our spiritual lives. On Passover, we were granted the gift of freedom. On Shavuot, God gave us His Torah, our charter as His kingdom of priests and a holy people. Rosh Hashanah is the day on which God first became king. On Yom Kippur, God granted us the gift of Teshuvah, the capacity to rectify and transform a deficient past. Hanukkah marks the salvation of the Jewish soul, the triumph of light and purity over darkness and adulteration, the miracle of Purim, the salvation of the Jewish body, and so with all the festivals and special dates and periods on our calendar.
Okay. So let's focus on to the holiday that's coming up to be able to help
Hanukkah,
us tap into the Chanukah energy that is coming up. So if you look at the bottom of page 108, it says here's a table. The table is on page 109 of the central Chanukah themes. Choose one and consider how it might enhance your own Jewish practice by doing something new or by re-energizing something you already do. How might the message of Hanukkah infuse your regular year-round observance with deeper purpose? Remember, just to use the analogy of the well, what happens between the wells when the king's son is traveling through the desert? How does he live in between the wells? How does he stay hydrated?
Canteen. He has
In
a
a
camp thermos.
canteen.
He has a
Exactly. He
thermos.
takes he takes some water from the well and he carries it with him until it runs out or until he gets to the next well, right? And the same is true in Judaism.
yes,
How do we get special energy and special vitality and spiritual energy? Every day, every Shabbos, but especially every Jewish holiday gives us some unique energy that keeps us hydrated spiritually till the next signpost. So, what are some of those spiritual energies? You ever see vitamin water? It has antioxidants and it
yes,
has this and it has that. It has all these wonderful things listed: vitamin B12, vitamin C, vitamin this and that and the other. So, what's in the water of Hanukkah? Or I should say, what's in the oil of Hanukkah? So, let's see. Message number one.
Dedication.
What?
Dedication.
Well, look on page 109. You'll see exactly what's there. So it's a chart with the Hanukkah energy on one hand, and then how it could apply to life. I'm just going to go through three of them because we're running short on time. So one message of Hanukkah is always go up. How do you see that? Because each night of Hanukkah, we add a new candle, building light and never remaining the same. That is the energy, the spiritual emphasis that we do on Hanukkah. Again, that's a ritual that we do, which symbolizes a deeper spiritual energy that's present. And that teaches us how do we apply that to life? That Jewish life too must grow. Stagnation is not an option for a living soul. You ever heard the analogy of the mountain climber? A mountain climber knows one basic rule. You're always moving. Either you're moving up or you're falling down. Because if you just put the stakes in and you say, well, you know what, I'm just gonna rest here for a little bit, it's gonna fall out and you're gonna go tumbling down. A Jew always needs to be climbing upward, just like the Hanukkah candles. The next lesson is self-sacrifice. The Maccabees fought against impossible odds, risking everything for what they believed in. What's the application to our lives? There are moments when we too must stand for truth, just like the Maccabees, even when it costs us. And the third one, which will be the last one we do here, is do your best. The Maccabees could have settled for impure oil. And by the way, according to Jewish law, if you don't have pure oil, you are allowed to light the Hanukkah menorah, not the Hanukkah menorah, I'm sorry. You're allowed to light the temple menorah with impure oil. But they didn't settle for that. The Maccabees could have settled for impure oil, but they insisted on doing the mitzvah in the most beautiful, uncompromised way. And they went looking and searching to find one jug of oil that was untouched, that was unharmed and unbroken by the evil Greeks. And then, what's the application to our lives? When we strive for excellence in our mitzvah observance, God meets us halfway with miracles. So we might think that a certain mitzvah is out of our reach, whether it's putting on tefillin every day, whether it's keeping kosher, whether it's studying Torah on a regular basis, whether it's keeping Shabbos, whether it's putting a mezuzah on all our doors. We might feel like, how can we do this mitzvah in the most proper way? And the answer is, if we strive for excellence and we want to do it the right way, miracles do happen. God will find that jug of oil for you, but you have to look for it. That's all you need to do. You got to do your best. Now, before we go to page 110, I want to just... we're really short on time. But I think this is an important video because you can see that the Rebbe really lived this idea of living with the times. In other words, if I asked you what's going on, what's in the news this week, you might tell me something you read in the New York Times. You might tell me something you read in the LA Times, or maybe something you watched on KTLA. But that's not the real times. Living with the times means living with the Jewish times. You know what happened today? Yaakov married Leah. And then Leah gave birth to Reuven, and Leah gave birth to Shimon, and Levi, and Yehuda. That is this week's Torah portion. That's what we're living with. And so the Rebbe was able to live this, not just preach it, but he literally, every time he spoke, he would talk about the fact that it's Wednesday, and on Wednesday the sun and the moon were created, and therefore today, Wednesday, is a special day. Or he'll talk about the fact that it's Shabbos and the meaning of that. And I'll let the video speak for itself, because it's incredible to see how the Rebbe brought this out on a practical level regularly.
Learning the clock is an early milestone, but the Lubavitch Rebbe taught that there's more to time than just hours and minutes. Every second is alive with purpose. The Rebbe explained that because God is constantly creating the world anew, today isn't just a repeat of yesterday. Each moment is freshly charged with its own mission. Our job is to live with the times, to discover what today is meant to bring out in us. How do we do that? Think of 3 easy steps. Step 1, notice the layers of time. Every moment has many labels. The day of the week, the daily section of the weekly Torah portion, the month of the Jewish calendar, the present year, and special events like birthdays and anniversaries. The Rebbe emphasized that each of these factors carries a personal lesson for that day.
Und mehrere Jahre lief nicht sehr, aber Pikena, sie kommt derselbe Tag, im selben Cheder, nur miteinander Jahr, ist er dann miteinander Linien, einander erwiderte.
Step 2, tap into the power in the date. The Rebbe often pointed out that since creation is precise and purposeful, each weekday echoes the story of its creation. For example, Wednesday, when the sun and moon were formed, is a day to increase and share light.
Gefiel mir Zachister bei jedem Horvi in den festen Tag von Woch, was damals sagt, wenn der Rebischter hat beschaffen, es Hamoir HaGode, die Sohn, es Hamoir HaGott und die Levone.
Each month adds its own energy. For example, Nisan brings freedom and miracles, and the 18th of any month highlights Chai, the power of life. Step 3, find the order of the day. The Rebbe loved the image of God as our commander-in-chief and us as his soldiers. Each day receives a unique assignment from our commander-in-chief. He urged us to live with the times, drawing guidance from the daily section of the weekly Torah portion. Like a soldier checking the day's orders first thing in the morning, we look to Torah to discover today's mission.
Aber soll leben mit der Zeit und Masbir gewähren hat das Menschen mit der Chelik von Parshas HaShavua, was sie in der Parsha Gufe verbunden mit dem Tag.
Instead of letting time slip by, we should fill each moment with purpose and joy. The real question isn't just what time is it? It's what is this time for? When we live this way, every day becomes a timely gift, waiting to be opened and put to good use.
So again, the question isn't what time is it, but the question is what is this time for? And how do we utilize this time? So to figure out what this time is for, so tonight is the 6th day of Kislev. It's Tuesday night, which in the Jewish calendar means we're already in Wednesday, the 4th day of the week, because the first day of the week started Saturday night. So look on page 110, where it talks about how every day of the week is another sphera, another expression of one of God's 7 divine attributes. So Wednesday is the sphera of Netzach, which is victory, which in other words means perseverance, which is explained as determination to overcome one's undesirable character traits and habits, a steadfast commitment to advancing God's purpose in the world, no matter the obstacles or resistance. Look at that. That perseverance to do what God wants us to do, even if there's obstacles in the way, that is an energy that we have on every Wednesday of every week. We have an extra energy to be able to do that. And the same is true with certain energy in certain times of the month. As Jews, we follow the lunar calendar. So on page 111, we are in the phase where the moon is waxing, which reflects our need to continuously grow in our service of God. I'm not going to go through this whole section, but you see the idea that everything has a spiritual energy. The month of Kislev is a month of light. Chanukah is a festival of lights. Yud-Tes Kislev, the day that the founder of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, was released from prison and began teaching the light of Kabbalah, the light of Jewish mysticism to the masses, which is again a light and an energy. That's something that's extra present in the month of Kislev. And the same thing on page 114, where we go through the 54 parshas of the Torah. This week in Parshas Vayetze, study the Torah portion of this week about Yaakov and Rachel and Leah and the whole interplay between them, and how Yaakov was supposed to marry Rachel and he married Leah and then also married Rachel, and the whole story. There's countless lessons that we can learn in how to live today with purpose. And we learn that by tapping into these ideas. So in other words, look, I'm not going to go through every Torah portion in the Torah over here. You can do that on your own time. But the idea is, as we see in the video from the Rebbe lived with this idea that every day absolutely matters and is important and significant. And there's a certain energy, not just on Shabbos, not just on holidays, but every day of every year of every week is incredibly meaningful, and not just meaningful, not just in the Plymouth Rock way, not just in the assigned meaning, but it's intrinsically meaningful. There's a mission, there's a purpose, there's the order of the day. The commander-in-chief, God Almighty, is telling us, I got work for you today. I have an assignment. You have a role to play in my world. You better do it because I need you. And that's something that's very, very important. Who was it? A young bar mitzvah boy was once asked, what do you think about when you say Shema? He says, I think about how God is the most important thing to me, and I'm the most important thing to God. Now, for somebody to say that I think about that God is the most important thing to me, big deal. All religions say that. But what Judaism and Kabbalah teaches us is that I'm the most important thing to God. God needs me. He needs me with my talents, as we talked about in the past couple of weeks. And he needs me in this moment. Today, there's an order of the day. There are marching orders telling me exactly how I should live my life today. So if you want, on page 120, you can do the exercise creating a profile of today or any day that you choose and see how there could be meaningful implications and directives of how to live that day with purpose. And finally, just to conclude, and that is the idea of personal times. Specifically, I want to talk about birthdays because the Rebbe instituted the Miftzah Yom Huledet, the birthday campaign, saying that the day that you were born, again, going back to the chutes and ladders, it's because this day is perfectly designed for you to be born on that day. So in other words, my birthday is on the 27th day of Kislev. The 27th day of Kislev is the third day of Chanukah. So there's something about me and Chanukah that is intrinsically connected. And that's why God had it that I should be born on Chanukah, because there's something about my soul that is connected to Chanukah. And if I would have been born in Cheshvan, it would be the wrong landing spot for me. It would be like putting the telescope on the Santa Monica Pier. That's not where it belongs. The telescope belongs on Mount Wilson. I belong on Chanukah. That's when my soul had to be brought into this world. So the Rebbe tells us that the day you were born is a perfect match for your soul's energy. And therefore, we need to celebrate our birthdays, which reaffirms the value of life. Just like with the illustration I showed you earlier of the car accident, right? You have to thank God for the fact that you were given life, that you survived a dangerous situation. You need to, of course, thank God that you were born. And not just once upon a time you were born, but every day when that time occurs, it's like the spiral staircase reminding us this is a day that I am given special energy, unique energy. It's like my own Rosh Hashanah. It's a day for meditation. It's a day for thinking, what am I doing on this world? Why did God choose to put me here today? But also a day of gratitude, a day of thanks, a day of Thanksgiving. You want to know when I'm celebrating Thanksgiving? December 17th. In a few weeks, because I'm going to thank God for the fact that he brought me to this world. Let me just show you how to figure out when your Hebrew birthday is. Okay, here's just a little technical fun part. And that is you go to, forget this long link, just go to jewisharcadia.com/birthday. And when you're there, go to the bottom where it says, when is my birthday? Click that. And then you'll see the Jewish birthday calculator. Type in your birthday, in my case, this, and it'll show you the date. You click on it, and then it'll ask you what time of day you were born, because it has to figure if you were born before nightfall or after nightfall. And it's optional. You can put in your Jewish name. Click next, and then it tells you your Jewish birthday is, in my case, the 27th of Kislev, in the Jewish year of 5751, which will occur next on Wednesday, December 17th, 2025. And here's, once you do that, you scroll down and you'll see that there are a bunch of other links. It'll tell you what other things have happened in Jewish history, what your Torah portion is. And then the fun part is you can print out this certificate, which, one second, which I did right here. See that? You can print that out by doing that. So again, you go to jewisharcadia.com/birthday, and you can create your own Jewish birthday certificate for yourself. And now we'll go to the lesson summary.
Lesson 4. Rhythms of time. 1. Judaism teaches that each day carries its own spiritual energy, and by aligning with the rhythms of time, even routine actions are infused with new vitality. 2. The sacredness of Jewish holidays and special occasions is not merely a projection. The time itself is inherently holy. This is an objective reality. The holiness of these days is not something we create, but something we enter. 3. Jewish holidays are opportunities to access spiritual wells revealed through history. Each holiday brings its own divine energy, which we tap into through the mitzvot, prayers, and rituals that define the day. 4. Beyond holidays and special occasions, every day of the week and date on the calendar also carries its own spiritual significance. 5. A birthday is an annual return of the spiritual force that brought you into existence. The Rebbe encouraged Jews to embrace their birthdays and outlined a set of meaningful practices for that day.
You'll see those meaningful practices on page 122, figure 4.1. Those who were at the in-person class actually printed these out, birthday practices. I can send that to you as a PDF if you'd like. But otherwise, that concludes today's lesson. And thank you for joining us. And next week, we're going to talk about the, you're welcome. Next week, we're going to talk about the things in time that are less than exciting. The things that, let's just say we didn't choose, but maybe it chose us unwittingly. And seeing how all of that is purposeful and meaningful as well. So that class is called Meaning in the Unchosen. So I look forward to exploring that with you next week. Please God.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Very welcome.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?